My name's Jess Fraser. I am a black belt training at a Vanguard in Melbourne. I have been a black belt for just over 2 years now and been training Jiu Jitsu for 8.5 years, something like that. Yeah, something like that. Came to the sport obviously relatively late. Next year will be my 40th. So I started Jiu-Jitsu after I turned 30, which is, yeah, everybody wishes they came to the sport earlier for sure. But for me, it just kind of pushed me in a way that I needed to be pushed, knowing that my career had to be sort of hard and fast, which was really good for me. It motivated me a lot, you know. I am from Canberra, which I used to, I don't know, there used to be a thing about like being embarrassed to say that you're from Canberra, but now I love it, you know. There's such a good jiu-jitsu scene in Canberra. Or fight night, I think it's, you'll see, but yeah, watch it, because I'll get you the walkouts. When I was 12, I discovered snowboarding, and back then it was like metal boards, flat metal boards, you know, like it was the first of snowboarding. And we were all self-taught. There was no one to teach you because it was the first of the sport. Like we were the crest of the wave then, you know. So I worked at the local IGA, which was OWL at the time. Yeah, every 2 months I'd work, I'd be able to go one weekend away to the snow, and yeah, again, self-taught. And then for me, when I came to Jiu-Jitsu much later on and started training, it was really hard for me to ask for help because I didn't know how, you know. I'd never learned in that way from other people, and I found it really confronting. It made me feel very vulnerable to ask for help, to seek it, you know, like, and it brought out a lot of emotion for me at the time. When I finally worked out how to be guided, like it just took off. I think the combination of like being used to being upside down and flipping and stuff, so whether it was like wakeboarding or snowboarding or whatever, like that combination, plus like pretty willing to just do the hard yards, you know, like all work together to be able to do jiu-jitsu. Yeah. When I was 19, so it's interesting because I kind of did like the stop-start of what Australian Girls in Gi is, but for snowboarding when I was really young. At 12, I decided I wanted to be a snowboarder, and I just worked so hard on it, you know. I loved it, and I was training girls, but by mid-high school I was training girls for like border cross and stuff for my local school. And then I had this like grand plan that I wanted to like buy myself a van, do a small business course, like start this whole plan for like women in snowboarding. Yeah, and it was like I was doing my first season, like after school, I was doing my first season, get everything rocking and going, making connections and networking and stuff, like as you have to set this stuff up. And I smashed my ankle into a million pieces. So it was a career-ending injury that sucked and changed the course of my life at the time. After that, like I got really overweight, like really overweight for me, you know, like, and it's not to say that it's overweight for everybody, but I like walk around like between 64 and 66 now, but I got to 103 then. It was a real big size for me, you know, and I was miserable and hating life and not really knowing how to get out of the trap of being overweight, and my goals and my career sort of gone, and went into like a relatively big funk over that one, you know, like totally reasonable response. I think I was in that for a while, and my sister talks about that time as like as if like I was writing on the walls of a prison cell all the things that I wanted to do when I got out of my fat suit, you know. And I did. I got out of the fat suit. It started with just walking, and then, you know, going to like a step aerobics class, which was hell on earth. And then, you know, it sort of started steamrolling. And as soon as I started to drop the weight, it was like, I was 25 and I was doing like Krav Maga on Monday nights, yoga on Tuesday nights, fire dancing on Wednesday nights, and like, you know, just everything. Every day I was doing a new thing. I was still partying pretty hard at the time, and I just didn't have an answer. When, like, you go to the pub and people are like, so what do you do? And I was like, I just didn't want to say, oh, it counts, you know? Like, I wanted to have an answer that was, oh, I'm a capoeira badass, you know? I wanted some answer that was cool. And so I got into Krav Maga and yoga. I ended up being an instructor in Krav Maga and an instructor in yoga, and neither really worked. It was like extreme violence and extreme you know? And me, like, it was like both were me, but it was like I had a completely different version of Jess at these two different locations, you know. And it was when I was teaching yoga that I was teaching yoga in Little Bourke Street on the 3rd level of a building on Little Bourke Street. And while we were doing sun salutations, my class would be bent over, right? And I was looking across the laneway at Ground Zero, which I think pretty much everyone in Melbourne came through Ground Zero at some stage. Like, in my generation, everybody trained at Ground Zero at some point. So I went and asked about classes there, and I was walking out of teaching a class there one evening, and there was 3 massive dudes down at the front of the building, and I was like, do you guys do jiu-jitsu? And they said, yeah. And those 3 guys are my main training partners still today. Yeah. When I think about the combination of Krav Maga and yoga, that's pretty much what we're doing, right? Like, it's not on any technical level, but the supreme violence and the supreme zen of it all together was actually what I was seeking, you know? And the violence of it by itself, so the Krav Maga or just the self-defense of it by itself, didn't work. And the full, like, you know, tree-hugging hippie that I was, like, by itself, didn't work either. But together, that actually is my experience with jiu-jitsu, you know? So I talked to Marty, and he said, look, I think that you should do 18 months of just one of the disciplines, like just do just straight kickboxing for 18 months, or just do straight jiu-jitsu for 18 months and then switch. So the plan was, at the age of 30, I wanted to fight by 33. So yeah, 18 months of jiu-jitsu and then 18 months of Muay Thai at the time I was thinking was the mission, and then have my first fight by 33. I was 18 months to the day standing on the podium of the Blue Belt Open in Abu Dhabi. So I'd won the trials, and then I'd won a bronze in the Open. And so the decision was made for me. I was standing on a podium going, okay, well, you can't deny this. I don't think most people do this. I was looking around, I was like, well, there's 3 of us that have done this, you know? And knowing my timeline, knowing that I'd only been in it 18 months, knowing that if I had fought somebody that had been in it for the same amount of time as me, that I would have been standing on the top of the podium. So that made the decision for me. And then I went back to Abu Dhabi a bunch more times, you know, came back with medals every time, which has been nice. I'm sort of stuck with competing in Australia, you know. I run an organisation that supports women in jiu-jitsu. Every single woman that I fight now in Australia has a team of women that are loyal to her, and if I beat her, they're loyal to her, and it affects my business. So I've now been sort of muzzled in Australia, and I choose not to compete in Australia anymore because it affects my livelihood, and I'm not into that. It's not worth it. I like to compete overseas, it's just expensive. So my last one was No-Gi Worlds. That was my first international No-Gi comp, and I came home with bronze in like a division that like still makes me really happy that I came home with a bronze for that. But before that, yeah, I competed a lot. I was trying to prove something to others as a competitor. And I guess when I realized that I don't have to do that, I slowed down with competition as well. Blue belt, I competed like a crazy person, like more than anyone should. At purple belt, you hit a point in Australia, I think the guys get it too, you know, but definitely as a female at purple belt, my first Pan Pacs purple belt, I think, was the biggest purple belt division that's ever happened in Australia, and it's got smaller since then because we were all packed into the one event. There wasn't Grappling Industries then, there wasn't other options, so everyone turned up for the Pan Pacs. I mean, a bunch of girls came in from New Zealand, and the open weight was just awesome. You had Marin, you had Mary Ann, you had me, you had Kate, you had like, it was just packed. It was insane. It was a really, really fun day. And after that, I had fought everybody. I'd fought everybody that there is in Australia. The only person that I hadn't beaten was Mary Ann. I think that's fair. Like, she's pretty damn good, you know? Pretty damn good and pretty damn big for me. But like, you know, if we could fight again, I would love that, you know? But she was just so far ahead. She kind of had to wait for us. And then we weren't, the girls that came through in my generation, we weren't ready for her, you know? Not at that time. At brown belt, my coach at the time, who's not my coach now, asked me to retire. So I did, which is a pain in the ass, and I lost time. When I finally left that coach, I packed up all my shit and I sold everything, and I left my boyfriend at the time, and I left like my house, and I left everything, and my job, everything. Went to America, entered 10 comps, so I had like San Diego Open, I had New York Open, I had Abu Dhabi, I had Worlds, I had like, it just went on forever. 10 comps booked and paid for. Like every couple of weeks, you know, Nagas and everything, just smash it out. And I just wanted to finish my brown belt in style and like kill it, you know, because I was finally like out of the box. Again, I'd been writing on the walls of the prison cell, you know, like what I might do when I finally got out of like the situation where coach was saying to me, you should retire, you're too old, whatever. It was wrong, but I did go solo, and that's really hard. So I was training with gyms that I didn't know. We were getting ready for Pan Ams, and I just was in the wrong training environment and not able to say it was too much for me, you know, because they weren't my coaches, they were new to me. Kind of put it in a hard situation, and I ruptured my bicep and tore like my labrum and my shoulder and all this kind of stuff. So I lost the bicep on my left side, the long head of the bicep, which is still gone. And that took me a year to come back from. So once I missed all those comps, dealt with the heartbreak of that, I worked on my black belt, and then the next year was what we got last year. So yeah, that was my whole competition career. Brown belt I didn't do as much, just purely because I was asked not to. And I regret that. So yeah, I think I would have been fine. I don't think I'm too old. I proved that last year at black belt, and that's why I was so happy when I came home with both those medals from Abu Dhabi and from Nogi Worlds, because it proved to me a lot about, I knew I was fine, and I knew my standard as well. I've always known my standard and known where I sit with the other women, and it was really nice to go out and just like prove it with medal. Look, every belt is different, and as white belt, you just have to beat other white belts. I think that we forget that we think that we've got to, I don't want to let my team down. You're not going to let your team down. They're so terrified themselves, they're doing their own thing. They're shooting themselves quietly somewhere else, you know? So that's a big thing, is you're not going to let your team down. You're certainly not going to let me down as a coach. No one's ever going to let me down as a coach for doing what they love and having a go, unless you do something like batshit crazy, like punch someone in the face, or I don't know, throw a chair. Like, unless you do something that's completely inappropriate socially anyway, you cannot possibly disappoint me or let me down or whatever. Even like I've got students that compete, and like in nerves, they don't show their best jiu-jitsu. I know what they can do. I see them roll every day. They're not going to let me down by not being able to pull the trigger on the day, because some people have it and some people don't, and some people are going to have to work really hard to learn it. But I'm never going to judge my students. And if I could, you know, if I could put that knowledge into me as Jess Fraser when I was like coming up, I just had the weight of the world on my shoulders with competing. I honestly thought, one of the things that was hard back when I first started competing is most gyms had 1 or 2 girls, and one girl would be the competitor girl, and she was like the kid sister of every dude in the gym, and she was a badass. And if they talked about chicks in jiu-jitsu, they'd be like, oh, there's this one chick in my gym, she's just a hard ass, like she can beat up all the dudes, And so back then, you had to get all of those girls, we did have all of those girls come together and beat each other up. So it was like every girl there was defending the honor of her whole gym, I remember people would always say, just try to have fun. Fun? You fucking kidding? There's nothing fun about this, And now I see what they were trying to do. I was so intense, and I was so convinced that I had to do well. It was all self-inflicted. I really I felt like I had to prove it, to prove my worth within the community, prove my validation to even be running this thing like Australian Girls in Gi. I know it's easy now as a black belt to go, no, I run Australian Girls in Gi. Of course I do. But as a blue belt, it was really intimidating. And I felt like if I was a blue belt that wasn't winning, which I know isn't real now. As long as you're a good community organizer, you can run any community you like. If you lead with some kind of decent moral compass and are kind to people and facilitate events, it doesn't matter what you do with your sport. In fact, we've got women in Australian Girls in Gi that don't roll or train, and they're really involved in the organisation of Australian Girls in Gi, and there's no question to me about that anymore, but at the time I thought I had to be everything. I had to be fantastic on the mats, and I have to be fantastic at competition and all this stuff to prove my worth. And yeah, none of it's real. I try to explain that to people that are coming up and competing and think that if they don't win, they're not good at jiu-jitsu. And I can see it, it's impossible to hear it until you've lived it and realised that it doesn't prove your worth at all. Yeah.